She called the cops and screamed, "Arrest him." But I was standing on my own driveway right next to the faded metal sign that said, "Private Parking, Unit 4." Every morning for 2 months, the same silver Porsche would glide into the single spot I paid for. Every morning, Karen's son would step out like he owned the block, tie his expensive shoes, nod at her like a king, and stroll away while I watched my kids squeeze past his bumper. I kept my voice low. I waved once. He ignored me. Karen stapled a thin, fake HOA notice to my door one afternoon. Violation unauthorized parking, and stood at the gate with that smile that felt like a threat. "You can't live here anymore," she said loud enough for the whole street to hear. People looked. My neighbor's little girl started to cry. I felt the heat in my chest, but I stayed calm, because I knew where the truth lived. I had receipts, the deed, the bank papers, the original permit from the old board, and I had something else she didn't know about. My phone. For months I'd been recording, not to show off, but to build an unbreakable record. So when she yelled, "Arrest him," I raised my phone and hit record slow like I was signing my name. The kid's smirk split when he saw me filming. He slammed his car door 2 times, too hard, as if that could fix the fact he was on someone else's land. Karen's face went pale for a second. Then she did what she always does, leaned harder into fake authority. "You'll pay," she hissed. "I'll get you evicted." I smiled in a small, steady way that surprised me. I was a man who had been pushed but not broken. "Try it," I said quietly, and that little word made her bite down on her jaw. He thought his Porsche made him untouchable. He was wrong. Right then, the kid reached into the glove compartment and the whole street held its breath. I reached into my pocket too, and pulled out something nobody in the neighborhood expected. He reached into the glove box slow and sure, like he'd practiced the moment 100 times. I slid my hand out of my pocket and held up a thin laminated card. Not a cop badge. Just paperwork, a court-stamped affidavit, the original deed with my name, the old board's permit, and a printed timeline of every time that Porsche had taken my spot. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The paper did the talking. "This is your 3rd certified notice," I said. "It's been logged. I filed for removal this morning." Silence hit the street like a gust of wind. Karen's smile froze into something hard. Her son's knuckles tightened on the key fob. He blinked, confused, because entitlement doesn't come with paperwork. He tried to laugh it off, but the kids across the way were still watching. I tapped record on my phone again, then hit send. The footage and the affidavit went straight to a tow company and the county inspector I'd met last month when Karen tried to shut my mailbox. That inspector owed me nothing, but he owed the city a clean record. 2 minutes later, a rumble started down the block. The tow truck pulled up like the end of a long argument. The driver stepped out. A gruff woman with an old scar and a grin that knew exactly whom she didn't like. She opened her clipboard and read my name, then the court stamp. Karen's voice climbed up an octave. "You can't tow his car, he's my son," she yelled. The driver looked at her, then at the kid, and said, slow and simple, "Lady, the law doesn't care about who's related to who." The kid lunged toward the Porsche, keys out, but the driver had already clipped the wheel. He froze, the street holding its breath again. I felt the hot rush of something I hadn't felt in a long time, an unfair fight finally turning into a fair one. As the tow truck winched the Porsche, Karen screamed into her phone. She called the cops. She called her lawyer. She called everyone with influence and a pretty voice. I let her call. I had one more quiet move left, and when I pulled it out, it would make sure this was more than a tow. The neighborhood watched the car go, the shiny hood disappearing around the corner, and someone shouted, "He just towed a Porsche." That line landed in the air like a grenade. Next, the son's face changed from shock to something darker, a face I knew well because I'd seen it in courtrooms and on military bases. He wasn't finished. His jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists like he was about to charge me right there on the driveway. But then he smirked instead, that kind of smirk that says, "I've got another card to play." He pulled out his phone and started filming me, shoving it in my face like I was the criminal. "This guy's harassing me on my own property," he shouted loud enough for the cameras that weren't even there. Karen gasped on cue, clutching her chest like a bad theater actress. "Yes, he threatened my son. He's dangerous." I didn't move. I just let them perform. Because what they didn't know was that my security cameras had caught every second of the last 2 months. Every morning that Porsche rolled into my spot. Every time Karen ripped up my complaints and tossed them in the trash. Every smug grin her son gave my kids when they had to walk in the street because his car blocked the sidewalk. It was all stored, backed up, and already in the hands of someone who knew how to use it. See, I wasn't just a homeowner. Before this quiet neighborhood, before the mortgage and the little garden in the yard, I wore a different uniform. Military taught me patience. Federal contract work taught me records. And marriage to a prosecutor's daughter taught me one simple rule: never fight in the dark when you own the light. So while Karen screamed into her phone, the real police cruisers rolled up, sirens cutting the evening quiet. Not her friends she bragged about, not the rent-a-cops from her fake HOA notices, real officers. They stepped out slow, hands resting on their belts, eyes already narrowing at Karen's volume. She jumped on the chance. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man, he assaulted my son. He's trespassing. The taller cop raised a hand, stopping her cold. Ma'am, we've already received a complaint. Multiple, actually." His eyes shifted to me. "You filed these, correct?" I nodded once and handed over a small folder. He flipped it open, saw the stamped documents and then the still shots of the Porsche sitting across my parking sign every single morning. Karen's son tried to laugh it off. "It's just a parking spot, bro. You can't ruin my life over a spot." The officer closed the folder with a snap. "You're right," he said. "We don't ruin lives over parking spots, but we do enforce fraud, harassment, and false police reports." Karen's face dropped. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The neighbors leaned in closer, and me, I stayed quiet, because this was only the beginning. I hadn't even used the footage yet. The clip that would end all of this in one viral strike. Karen finally found her voice, but it came out cracked. "Fraud? Harassment? He's the one harassing us. He's obsessed with my son's car." Her hands trembled as she waved toward me, but the cops didn't flinch. The taller one asked flatly, "Ma'am, do you have any ownership documents for this property? Any legal authority over his parking spot?" She froze. Her son tried to cover for her, laughing nervously. "Come on, officer, you don't need paperwork. Everyone knows my mom basically runs this place. It's like common sense, that did it." A couple of neighbors chuckled out loud, and Karen's face flushed red. The officer's voice sharpened. "Sir, the law doesn't run on common sense, it runs on evidence. And all I see is his paperwork, stamped and certified, and months of video evidence that you've been trespassing." I could see Karen's panic building, her eyes darting like she was searching for a way out. That's when I pulled my phone from my pocket again and tapped a file I'd been saving for the perfect moment. The screen lit up with crystal clear footage. Her son parking the Porsche, flipping off my camera and shouting, "What's he gonna do? Call mommy's HOA army? We own this block." The officer leaned closer to watch, and the crowd of neighbors let out a collective gasp. Karen snatched at the phone, but I pulled it back. "Don't worry," I said evenly. "This isn't just on my phone. It's already uploaded." That word "uploaded" hit harder than anything else. She knew what it meant. No cover-up, no more bullying behind fake HOA notices. If the footage went online, her precious reputation, her fake authority, and her son's smug arrogance would be shredded in front of the whole town. Karen staggered back a step, whispering, "You wouldn't." I looked her dead in the eye. "Try me." Her son's bravado cracked at last. He lunged forward, trying to snatch my phone from my hand, but before he could reach me, one of the officers grabbed his arm and shoved him against the hood of the squad car. The sound of the cuffs clicking shut was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months, but Karen wasn't done. Not yet. She straightened up, that fake authority sparking again, and hissed, "You don't know who you're messing with. You think this is over? You'll regret this." The cop holding her son looked over his shoulder and said dryly, "Ma'am, the only one in trouble here is standing next to you." And for the first time since this war started, I saw fear flash across Karen's eyes. But deep down I knew this was just the surface. She had more tricks hidden, and the real fight was about to get dirtier. The cuffs clicked tighter around her son's wrists, and the officer began reading him his rights. The neighbors whispered, phones raised high, recording every second. Karen spun in circles, her voice cracking as she yelled, "Stop filming. You don't have permission to film us." But the crowd only leaned in closer, smelling blood in the water. Then she snapped. Karen darted forward, jabbing a finger at the officer. "You can't do this. My brother's on the city council. My cousin works at the courthouse. I'll have your badges by tomorrow." Her words were fire, but her voice shook. The younger officer gave a low chuckle. "Ma'am, threats against law enforcement go in the report too. Want me to add that? For once, Karen went quiet, just for a beat. But her son wasn't done humiliating himself. You're ruining my life over a stupid car, he shouted, thrashing against the cuffs. Do you even know what this Porsche is worth? I stepped forward, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Less than the truth. That line hung in the air, heavy. A few neighbors clapped and someone muttered, finally. Karen's lips twisted and I thought she might lunge at me herself. But then, she did something worse. She pulled out her phone, hit speed dial, and within seconds she was barking into the speaker. Get the truck now, don't ask questions, just do it. Her eyes locked onto mine as if daring me to stop her. The cops exchanged a look, wary, but they didn't stop her. The law had limits and Karen knew exactly where to press. A low rumble echoed from down the street and sure enough, a black unmarked tow truck turned the corner. Its headlights glared, engine roaring louder than it needed to. The driver stepped out, a heavy-set man with tattoos creeping up his neck, and he didn't even glance at the cops. He looked straight at Karen and said, "Which car?" Karen lifted her hand slowly and pointed at mine. The crowd gasped, the officers stiffened, and I felt the cold edge of a new twist slide into place. She wasn't bluffing. She was about to try and steal my car right in front of the police. But what Karen didn't know, what no one on that street knew, was that the car she pointed at wasn't just a car. It was bait, and I'd been waiting for her to make this move. The tow driver cracked his knuckles, gave a nod, and stomped toward my car. Karen's smug grin spread wide again, like she'd just snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Hook it up, she ordered, loud enough for everyone to hear. That heap doesn't belong here anyway. But I stayed perfectly still, leaning on the fence, letting her think she'd won. The driver crouched to set the hook and then froze. A sharp metallic click cut through the street. Everyone turned as one. He looked down, confused, because instead of my car's wheel, his hook had locked onto something else. A heavy, bright orange Denver boot bolted onto my own tire. The crowd gasped. Karen blinked fast, not understanding. I finally spoke, calm but loud enough for all the cameras. That car you're trying to tow? It's been tagged and documented by the county as evidence. You touch it, you're tampering with a legal investigation. The taller officer stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from his vest pocket. That's correct. This vehicle is under official protection as of this morning. He unfolded the paper, showing the seal. Filed by Mr. Thompson here. Any attempt to move it without clearance is a felony. Karen's jaw dropped. You planned this? She stammered. I didn't blink. From the moment your son took my spot. The driver cursed under his breath and backed away, hands up. Hey, I don't mess with felony charges. You didn't say this was evidence, lady. He climbed back into his truck, slamming the door. Karen spun on him, screaming, Get back here! I said tow it. But he gunned the engine and peeled off, leaving her shrieking in the road. The neighbors were howling now, some laughing, some filming close-ups of Karen's meltdown. Her son sagged against the squad car, cheeks burning red. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I reached into my folder one last time and pulled out a thin envelope. Slowly, deliberately, I handed it to the officer. He opened it, read the first page, then looked at Karen with an expression that said the game had shifted forever. This, he said, holding it up, is a restraining order. Filed this morning. Effective immediately. Karen Miller, you are legally forbidden from stepping onto his property line or harassing his family under penalty of arrest. The crowd erupted. Karen's face drained white and she shook her head violently. No, you can't do this to me. This is my neighborhood. I'm the HOA. But everyone there knew the truth now. Karen didn't own a thing. She'd just lost the war she started. And still, I could feel it in the way she glared at me through the chaos. She wasn't finished. Not yet. She had one more desperate move left, and I knew it would be the dirtiest of them all. Karen's scream echoed through the cul-de-sac, raw and cracked like glass shattering. This isn't over, she shrieked, shoving past the officer as if the restraining order were just a suggestion. The crowd pulled back, phones still raised, whispering like they were watching a live TV episode. She jabbed her finger toward me, spit flying with each word. You think a piece of paper can stop me? You think you're safe because you've got some cameras and a lawyer's brat for a wife? I'll bury you. I'll bury your whole family. That line hit hard, too hard. The neighbors gasped. The cops stiffened, and I felt something deep in me shift, a heat I hadn't let out in years. I stepped forward slowly, not rushing, my eyes locked on hers. The officers tensed, ready to hold me back, but I didn't raise my fists. I raised my phone again. "Thank you," I said quietly, almost like a whisper. "That threat just sealed your fate." Karen's eyes widened when she realized what I meant. The recording was still rolling. Every scream, every insult, and now a direct threat against my family. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was criminal. The taller cop didn't even hesitate. He spun toward her. "Ma'am, you're under arrest." "No," she wailed, twisting, trying to pull away as he grabbed her wrists. "You can't do this." "I am the HOA." The officer snapped the cuffs on her, his voice calm but sharp. "You're not the HOA. You're just a trespasser with a loud mouth." The neighborhood broke into cheers, laughter, and more cameras flashing than a red carpet event. Her son shouted, "Mom, do something." But she was already being shoved into the back of the squad car. I stood still, watching, steady as stone. The Porsche was gone. The fake notices were worthless. And now Karen herself was locked behind glass, screaming as the cruiser door slammed shut. But even as the car rolled away, even as the crowd clapped me on the back, even as one neighbor muttered finally, "Justice," I felt something coil in my gut, because people like Karen don't go quietly. And when she got out, because she would, she wasn't going to come back with just her voice. She was going to come back with lawyers, with dirty tricks, with something bigger than a Porsche, and I was ready for it, because the last file in my folder, the one I hadn't shown anyone yet, wasn't about parking. It was about the HOA itself, and when I dropped it, the whole rotten board would go down with her. I pulled one last folder from my pocket like it was the ace I'd been hiding. The paper inside wasn't about parking. It was the HOA's books, my bank statements, signed minutes from meetings that never happened, and email chains where Karen and 3 board members joked about collecting extra fees and moving people out who didn't fit the vibe. There were receipts for a contractor who'd never fixed anything and a wire transferred to a shell company with Karen's maiden name in the memo. Someone near the curb read over my shoulder and muttered, "Oh my God." The sound spread. Karen's face went white. Then a kind of pale fury came over her that smelled like panic. She lunged forward again, but the officer stepped between us. "You have no right to touch those documents," he warned. She fumbled for something to say, anything to stop what was happening, but there was no script left for her. I didn't make a speech. I didn't need to. I opened my phone and hit send, not just to a local group chat, but to a reporter I'd met months ago when I'd started poking holes in the HOA. The reporter's name flashed on my screen. A single tap and the entire folder, every page, every bank transfer, every fake signature, was on its way to their inbox and to the county prosecutor's office. This time, the crowd didn't roar. They leaned in with the same hungry silence as those at a parade when the floats reveal the real prize. Karen tried the intimidation again, voice higher, shaking. "You think you can ruin people's lives with a click? You'll regret it." I folded my hands and smiled, but not meanly, like a man who had done what he had to do. "I've been patient," I said. "I've been careful. That's the difference between someone who yells and someone who proves." The reporter arrived before the sun had set. She moved fast, asked one direct question, then another, and she didn't look away when she saw the documents. Her phone buzzed. She promised to run a piece by morning. She said the county had already flagged the email. "We'll want comment from the HOA," she said, glancing at Karen in cuffs in the cruiser. Karen's eyes met mine, and there was no malice left. Only the raw panic of someone who'd been exposed. Neighbors who used to avoid my stare began to come forward with their own stories. Missing dues, a locked mailbox, a home repair that never happened but was billed. A woman in a floral dress offered me a stack of papers. Her own file of receipts showing the HOA charged her for landscaping she never got. A young dad handed over a video of Karen tearing down his son's holiday lights because they weren't HOA approved. Each new piece slid into the pile until it became a paper avalanche. That night, lights stayed on in half the houses on our street. People traded whispers and stories like soldiers sharing maps. The town was waking up to something rotten, and I felt a quiet pride that this fight had become everyone's. But even as the neighborhood rallied, I kept thinking about consequences.
Karen had lost today, yes, but the board ran deep.
There were lawyers, favorites, and people who could slow us down with papers and motions and enough money to clog a courthouse. So I did one more thing nobody saw coming. I took the last document, a scanned title transfer that showed one tiny, odd signature linking the HOA's shell company to a developer 2 towns over. And I traced it back with friends who owed me favors, a county clerk, an old contractor, and a retired judge who liked righting wrongs. It was a quiet chain of small debts repaid. By morning, the county prosecutor had what she needed to open an investigation. By noon, the story would be live. I walked back to my driveway and sat on the curb, the house dark behind me. My kids peeked at the window, sleeping masks half off, eyes wide. I waved once, small and private. "We're okay," I mouthed. The kids blinked and vanished. Some fights are loud. Some fights are patient. Tonight we had both. The board had been exposed, the police had made arrests, and the county was watching. But as I looked down the street at Karen's dark house, I felt the long road ahead. The next twist wouldn't be petty or loud. It would be legal, slow, and final. And when it landed, it would leave no room for fake authority to hide. The next morning started like a small holiday. Reporters circled the cul-de-sac, but they weren't looking for fireworks, and they wanted facts. The county prosecutor's office had opened a formal investigation. The sheriff's department served subpoenas. The bank put holds on the HOA account. The shell company that had skimmed fees? Frozen. The 3 board members who signed fake minutes? Suspended pending charges. People I'd waved past for years stopped to thank me, handing over more paperwork as if we were building a case out of neighborhood scraps. Karen sat in a holding cell that smelled like bleach and regret. Her son called a frantic lawyer. The lawyer called a talk show host. The talk show host called me a villain. It was funny in a small-town way. The truth had teeth, not because I yelled, but because I kept receipts and I used them. The county billed the HOA for unpaid taxes and fines, and the tow company sent a final bill for the Porsche. No one paid. The car became evidence, then property of the state. A judge signed the order. Sell the vehicle to recover damages. One gray morning, a flatbed rolled up and carried the Porsche away. People shouted and cheered when they saw the hood latch for the last time. The county auctioned the car. A scrapyard bought it because of lien issues. The Porsche didn't explode into flames or get vandalized in a revenge fantasy. It became scrap metal sold for parts. Legal, clean, and undeniable. That last bit of irony, the car that screamed privilege ending up as metal, felt like a tidy, honest justice. The kid's Instagram followers watched him lose more than a car. He lost his armor of entitlement. But the bigger prize wasn't the Porsche. It was the HOA itself. With the documents public and the prosecutor digging, the county dissolved the old board and appointed a temporary administrator. People who had been afraid to speak up filed complaints and small claims. The county called for a full audit. The shell company's accounts traced back to developers who had overreached. They were fined and barred from doing business in 3 neighboring towns. The rotten core of the HOA unraveled like a bad script. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid problems started organizing. We held a meeting in my driveway. A real meeting with ballots, volunteers, and term limits. No more self-appointed rulers. We elected a small, honest board, a school teacher, a retired mechanic, a nurse, and a cleaning company owner. They fixed the broken lights. They repaired the mailbox. They changed the locks on the petty little powers that had been used to bully people. For the first time in years, the common area looked like something people cared for because they wanted to, not because someone screamed. Karen and her son faced civil suits and criminal charges. The prosecutor pushed for restitution and for a message that small-town corruption and fake authority would not be tolerated. The son had to testify in public. The cameras showed a different kid than the one who had once strutted down our sidewalk. He was younger and smaller, forced to explain choices he'd never had to own. They both pleaded. Some things settled, some things went to trial. Justice took time, and that was okay. The slow legal end was the one that mattered most. At home, the kids went back to packing their backpacks without worrying someone would block the driveway. My wife and I made no speeches. We fixed a broken swing in the yard and grilled burgers for the street. The school teacher on the new board made sure the holiday lights policy was fair. The retired mechanic started a tool share. The nurse organized a neighborhood watch that wasn't about patrols so much as looking out for one another. That felt like patriotism in small doses. Neighbors choosing to protect home and truth together. People would post clips and newscasts for weeks. Some called it a small victory. Others called it a lesson. I called it a reminder. Paperwork, patience, and the willingness to stand steady beat loudmouths with fake power. The last file I sent to the prosecutor had one line circled, the bank memo with Karen's maiden name. That tiny detail had pulled at a thread that led to a rope, and the rope had bound more than one liar. When the dust settled, a kid from down the block kissed his mother and said, "Dad, you were right to fight." I hugged my children and felt something quiet and wide inside. Not triumph, but relief. We hadn't screamed, we hadn't broken the law, and we'd protected our own. The neighborhood felt different, humbler, kinder, sharper. The Porsche was gone, the HOA was broken, and Karen's bluff had been exposed for everyone to see. And in the end, that one viral, ridiculous headline, "HOA Karen's son parked in my spot every morning," became a cautionary story. People quoted it with a laugh and a shake of their heads. The truth was simpler. When privilege tries to rewrite rules, evidence and community will rewrite it back. The scrap metal on a flatbed was only a symbol. What mattered was that we kept our land, our family, and our dignity. Weeks later, the neighborhood finally felt like it could breathe. Kids biked in the cul-de-sac without swerving around Karen's son's Porsche. Neighbors actually waved instead of hiding behind blinds, and the fake HOA notices stopped appearing on doors. For the first time in years, it felt like people weren't afraid of their own street. But then came the twist I had been waiting for. One crisp morning, a thick envelope landed in my mailbox stamped with the county court seal. Inside was a lawsuit. Karen had filed a civil complaint against me from jail. Pages of wild claims, defamation, property damage, harassment. She accused me of destroying her family's reputation, and even blamed me for her son losing his job at the dealership. It was laughable, except lawsuits aren't jokes. They cost money, time, and energy. That was her last weapon, to bleed me dry in court. I carried the papers inside, spread them across the kitchen table, and sighed. My wife looked at me carefully, then smiled, that small, knowing smile she'd worn through all of this. "Good," she said. "Now it's on the record. Now she has to face a real judge. We didn't panic. We prepared. Every fake notice, every video clip, every tow receipt, every restraining order organized and ready. And this time it wasn't just me. Neighbors volunteered their own files. The school teacher brought folders of old HOA fee statements. The retired mechanic had saved letters Karen forged years ago. Even the nurse had a flash drive of security footage. Piece by piece, the community built a wall of evidence taller than any lawyer's argument. The court date came fast. Karen walked in with her son at her side, both dressed like they thought appearances could erase history. She still carried that air of entitlement, but now it looked brittle, like glass ready to crack. The judge listened patiently, letting her rant about her neighborhood and her authority. And then calmly, he asked for evidence. Karen had none. We had stacks. One by one, I placed them before the bench. Notarized documents, certified videos, sworn neighbor statements. The judge flipped through them slowly, his face stone. When Karen tried to interrupt, he slammed the gavel once and said, "Sit down, Mrs. Miller, this isn't your HOA meeting. This is court." The courtroom broke into quiet laughter. Her son sank lower in his seat. By the end, the judge dismissed every one of her claims with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile them, and ordered her to pay restitution and legal fees. The sound of that gavel, sharp and final, was the true ending. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters asked how it felt to win. I didn't give them the speech they wanted. I just said, all I ever wanted was to park in my own spot and raise my kids in peace. That's it. And maybe that simple line was why the clip went viral. By nightfall, the headline spread across social media. HOA Karen tried to sue her neighbor from jail. Judge tosses case in seconds. The comments poured in. People cheering. People sharing their own HOA horror stories. People laughing at the Porsche that ended up as scrap. Back home, the cul-de-sac was quiet again. My kids ran out with chalk and drew big, messy words across the driveway. Our spot forever. The neighbors clapped and laughed. And for the first time, the street didn't feel divided. It felt like family. Karen's fight was over. The HOA's grip was broken. And standing there, I realized the real victory wasn't the Porsche or the court or even the headlines. It was that we had shown together that loud lies can't bury quiet truth. And in America, that's the kind of justice people never forget.